Welcome everyone to my review of another IDW Sonic special. And today we're tackling the 900th adventure. Why that name specifically? Well, thankfully, the special answers this in the beginning. Basically, the IDW team counted all of Sonic's English language comic adventures, including Archie, IDW, and even the UK's Fleetway series, to come up with a total of 899 adventures. Prior to this one, of course. In fact, if you go to this special's wiki page, you'll find exactly what comics are included in this total. If this list is accurate, in addition to the three companies I mentioned earlier, there are also tie-ins to games such as Sonic Forces and Sonic Frontiers, the comic interquel between the first Sonic movie and the second, and even the Grand Dream published comics are included. Props to whoever compiled this list together. You have earned my respect, because honestly, I would not have the time to do this. I've got a review to get to. Besides, this special was delayed twice, and between the original intended date and the actual day it would be released on, not only did IDW release a one-shot special called Endless Summer, they also released issue 64 as well. In the latter's case, it came out the exact same time as the 900th adventure. So yeah, assuming they were counting up to issue 63 at that point, technically we're seeing the 902 adventure. But for the sake of simplicity, let's exclude Endless Summer and issue 64 from this count. Before we get down to it, if you're new to the channel and like what you see here, the best way to support it is to hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. I'm also letting you know that from here on out, there will be spoilers aplenty. The 900th adventure is for all intents and purposes the 2023 annual, a large book that's a showcase of different writers and artists, both old and new, while doing some world building in the process. What makes the 900th adventure different than the others is that instead of the writers and artists working on smaller self-contained stories, they all contribute to one overarching tale. That being Sonic finally dealing with the Warp Topaz once and for all. In a nutshell, the different writers and artists would work on a segment of Sonic's journey as he'll encounter a number of obstacles and characters on the way. Should be interesting to say the least. For those who don't know and or need a reminder, the Warp Topaz is a magical gem capable of creating portals to different locations. Originally wielded by Dr. Starline, it was appropriated by Dr. Eggman as part of a plan to save the world against the Metal Virus. In fact, Super Sonic and Super Silver ultimately used it to open a portal to send every trace of Metal Virus into the sun. However, it was becoming unstable, and Super Sonic's attempt to get rid of it caused him to be sent to Blaze's dimension, as well as giving him amnesia. The Soul Emeralds fixed both of those problems, and life went on for Sonic, but the whereabouts of the Warp Topaz remained a mystery until today. From what I've heard, the original plan for the Warp Topaz was that it was going to be destroyed at the end of the Metal Virus arc, but instead was spared in case a story opportunity calls for it. No time like the present, they say. So here's how the summary will work. Due to the story changing hands several times, I'll credit who worked on a particular story segment in the bottom left corner. Gotta give the creators their due after all. Alrighty, this lengthy story begins in one of Tails' labs. The comic's not specific on which one. It could be his Emerald Town location, his workshop, or another place entirely. Sonic's chilling with his guitar while Tails recounts the times Sonic saved the world, like how he saved Angel Island from Neo Metal Sonic. Sonic says it was a group effort, so props to him for giving credit where it's due. Tails says he's fortunate to have known Sonic for a long time, to witness his many world-saving adventures. He's even kept a log of pretty much all of them, with the latest one, dealing with the Metal Virus, being number 899. Sonic once again points out that it was a group effort. His friends gathered the Chaos Emeralds, and he and Silver worked together to banish the stuff. Though Sonic admits he did supercharge the Warp Topaz with Chaos Emerald energy. And right on cue, the still supercharged Warp Topaz appears next to Sonic, as if saying its name summoned it into existence. Well, Sonic was the last one to yield it, so I guess it still has some connection to him? Tails' analysis show it's highly unstable, and it's surging in power. If it overloads again, it could destabilize the world at worst, or a city at best. Though that's still bad. Tails believes if they put the Warp Topaz back where Starline originally found it, that might neutralize it. Sonic quickly hops on board with the idea. Problem is, Sonic doesn't know exactly where to go, so he's just going to zip around the world until he finds the right spot. And more importantly, Tails warns Sonic that if the gem overloads while he's holding it in normal mode, well, let's just say amnesia will be the least of his worries. Sonic, as always, is confident he can pull this off, with Tails serving as mission control. Sonic has a risk communicator for the record. Tails also comes up with a possible way to ease Sonic's burden. Contact any of the friends that happen to be close to Sonic's position. With that, Sonic grabs the Warp Topaz and teleports away. Tails is able to contact Sonic, who's been transported to Green Hill Zone. And so, the 900th adventure officially begins. As Sonic makes his way through Green Hill, the Warp Topaz's instability really starts to show as it starts generating portals. Some things pop through them like a part of Dragon Road from Chunnan, and a killer orca that's gunning for Sonic. Because of course it does. Orcas are the natural predator of the hedgehog in this world after all. Well, I have some good news for our heroic prey. Having been contacted by Tails, Amy arrives to help Sonic deal with the whale, and to have someone for Sonic to save. Afterwards, Sonic fills Amy in on the situation. She's all for helping Sonic, but she would rather help the stranded orca first. So to appease Amy, Sonic reluctantly acts as bait for the orca. He leads it back towards its portal of origin, while Amy rides it. You better hurry up, guys. The portal's flooding the area with water from either Emerald Coast, or Wave Ocean, or wherever the heck this whale came from. As the whale leaps towards Sonic, he throws the gem at Amy, who knocks it a good distance away. The whale enters the portal home, and Sonic and Amy jump off before they get pulled in as well. With the Warp Topaz gone from Green Hill, the area stabilizes. Sonic has to get going if he's going to catch the gem quickly. Amy wishes him luck before he speeds off, leaving her behind. Don't worry, Sonic did catch the Warp Topaz off panel, because we next see them in a new location. Tails informs Sonic that Knuckles has been notified and is closing in on his position. He was filled in on what's happening, and believed it to be important enough for him to temporarily leave his guardian duties. With the entire world at stake, including Angel Island, how could he not refuse to help? The gem's about to release another burst of energy, and before Sonic can pass it to Knuckles, he's warped away, leaving Knuckles behind. He and the Topaz wind up in an Eggman lab right next to Metal Sonic. Sonic's not doing so hot, and Metal takes the Warp Topaz for himself. Sonic warns Metal about the gem's instability, but Metal doesn't care. He'll take any advantage he can get to beat his rival. And with Sonic apparently still weak, it looks like this is it. Until Sonic reveals he's just trolling with Metal Sonic. The Warp Topaz needed to change hands for Sonic to recover for a bit, and Metal Sonic would have been suspicious if it was handed to him without a struggle. The gem prepares for another spontaneous warp, and Sonic runs to intercept. Both he, Metal Sonic, and the gem wind up back at Knuckles' location, and with the gem back in Sonic's hands, he gives Metal Sonic an ultimatum. Fly back to Eggman, or try and take this unstable gem from his hand. Metal Sonic goes for option 1. The damage from the Topaz overload probably helped with that decision. Knuckles is ready to do his part and hold on to the Warp Topaz, but Sonic says, "Nah, I'm good," and takes off. Tails calls him out for this mean-spirited behavior. Sonic could have said to Knuckles that Metal Sonic gave him the break right then and there, but he'd rather save the explanation for another day. Maybe. We head over to Eggman attacking a city in an impressively looking mech, with Orbot and Cubot cheering him on from an Eggmobile. Then the Warp Topaz appears in Cubot's hands. Eggman wants to study it before Sonic intervenes. Too late, Doc. Sonic appears to reclaim the gem. Cubot attempts to mimic one of Shadow's signature moves, Chaos Control, with the Warp Topaz, but fails miserably. 1. Cubot doesn't understand how Shadow's ability works. And then again, Cubot is not the brightest bot around. And 2, even though it's supercharged with Chaos Emerald energy, the Warp Topaz is its own thing. There's a bit of a tug of war between him, Orbot, and Cubot, all while Eggman tries to deal with the hedgehog. But no matter what weapon he uses, a giant sword, his own fists, and even missiles, he keeps missing due to Sonic, Orbot, and Cubot zipping around the area through portals. Sonic does try to guide one of Eggman's missiles back at him, but he built a really good mech this time. As much as Sonic would like to stay and play with Eggman's cool looking mech, And yes, it is cool despite Sonic calling it nerdy. He has a world to save and warps out of there, leaving Eggman very disappointed. Look at it this way, Eggman. You can still release your frustrations on this defenseless city. Next, we see Sonic traveling through a multicolored gorge. That doesn't mean jack to Sonic since the gem's becoming unstable again, and he needs to hand it off to someone. Luckily, Blaze, Cream, and Cheese are in the area. The three of them were sightseeing when Tails gave them the call. Cream then goes on a rant. While she's being told over and over again she shouldn't go on dangerous missions, she wants to help Sonic any way she can with this one. To her, the Warp Topaz is a reminder of everything that happened during the Metal Virus saga, and wants to make sure it's not used for evil again. Sonic sees that Cream's mind is made up, and off the group goes, Sonic passing the gem to Blaze. Soon we get some spontaneous warping action as the gang are sent to what appears to be a jungle area. Tropical jungle maybe? Then they wind up in Water Palace, and then a city that kinda looks like Monopole. What's notable about these jumps is Blaze is getting too far ahead, and Sonic, Cream, and Cheese barely make it through a portal before it closes in on them. As they arrive at what appears to be Red Mountain based on the aesthetics, Blaze realizes how dangerous the Warp Topaz is, especially since there is a chance she'll be cut off from the others, and considers finding its resting place herself for the sake of her friends. But then another portal sends them high in the sky. Sonic, having a basic understanding of the Warp Topaz at this point, has Blaze focus on the gorge they started at, and with a little teamwork, they make it through. Sonic thanks them for the assistance and continues on his way. Sonic feels the gem building up with energy again, and Tails points out a spot he can get to if it pops. An abandoned Eggman mine that contains gold that Eggman wasn't interested in for some reason. The good news is it won't risk anyone. The bad news is, Tails' transmission can't penetrate the mine. And even worse, someone hacked in on Sonic and Tails' conversation, and are here to take the Warp Topaz for themselves. The Babylon Rogues. They want to sell it to the highest bidder despite Sonic warning them of the instability. As much as Sonic wants to hand the Topaz off to another person, it's not going to be them. After evading the Rogues, Sonic runs deeper into the mine. Jet's not worried thanks to them scouting the area earlier. They know that up ahead is a dead end, and Sonic ends up discovering it the hard way. It's not all bad, as waiting for Sonic at the dead end are Rouge and Shadow. Tails called them too. Rouge is happy to help, especially with the added bonus of getting some gold out of it, and Shadow doesn't like the idea of fools having the power of the Warp Topaz. That includes Sonic. So when the Babylon Rogues arrive, instead of a 3-on-3 fight, Shadow gives Sonic his ultimatum. Give him the Warp Topaz, or he'll take it by force. Sonic goes for option 3, burrow his own way out of the mine. The Babylon Rogues can't follow thanks to a portal blocking the path. The Rogues decide to take all the gold in the area as a consolation prize after they deal with in their mind, the wannabe ultimate life form. They made a big mistake calling Shadow that, and as a response, he uses his wannabe ultimate life form abilities to send the Rogues through the portal. Back on the surface, Sonic is back in contact with Tails and lets him know that he had a little trouble with the Rogues and Shadow, but found that the best way to win a fight is to avoid one altogether. Something the Babylon Rogues might consider learning as they lie in the snow. Sonic's desire to get rid of the unstable Warp Topaz quickly causes him to warp into a cave. Tails is picking up the same energy readings as the gem, meaning he's arrived at its point of origin. The transmission's a bit garbled, but Sonic is able to put together that he's at the right place, based on the few words he was able to hear. Good thing, because the Topaz, according to Sonic, is on its last legs, and one more burst could be it. Sonic zips around to find its original resting spot, until he does, courtesy of Starline's ego. After placing it back in its proper spot, it begins its one final discharge, with the added side effect of causing a cave-in. Sonic's able to zoom back to the surface before the whole thing collapses around him. Tails confirms he's no longer detecting the Warp Topaz, and Sonic says everything is A-OK thanks to everyone that helped out. And thus concludes the 900th adventure. Before focusing on the individual segments, let's discuss some of the overall elements of this special. One of the constant things between the stories is Sonic temporarily handing the Warp Topaz to other people. Even the solicitation says it's a game of hot potato. As Tails warns Sonic, a supercharged warp Topaz going off could be bad for him in normal mode. And he's right. Constant exposure made Sonic not feel so good. For instance, while Sonic was tricking Metal into picking up the gem, I think he was really affected by being teleported to his location. Even way back when, Starline himself pointed out that supercharging the gem would be a bad idea. That's why he placed it on a glove with limiters, and even he didn't escape its effects unscathed. So it is bold of Sonic to try to return a supercharged version to its home, and afterwards, he came away from it none the worse for wear. Plot armor, yes, but again, temporarily handing it off to others really helped out, whether they be hero or villain. The only exceptions being Amy, who just whacks it away from Green Hill. I'm surprised it didn't explode right then and there. Knuckles, as circumstances denied him the opportunity. Though given what happened to Metal Sonic when he was holding it, the Echidna likely dodged that proverbial bullet. And the incident in the abandoned Eggman gold mine. He would rather hold on to it and risk further exposure than handing it over to the likes of the Babylon Rogues or Shadow. On a related note, there is the constant theme of teamwork throughout the story. Not everyone gets their fair share, but they did contribute in some way. Tails came up with the idea on how to get rid of the gem, served as mission control, and called in any nearby allies to help out Sonic. Amy manages to stop Green Hill from getting torn apart with portals. Metal Sonic unknowingly gives Sonic a break. Knuckles, while seemingly doing nothing, was probably partially responsible for Metal Sonic's retreat. 2 against 1 usually is not a good odds, even if you are a speedy blue robot. That and the damage done by the Topaz discharge placed Metal Sonic at a disadvantage. Then we have Orbot and Cubot giving Sonic another break, while also having a little fun with Eggman. Blaze, Cream, and Cheese helped Sonic out the most, and there's Shadow and Rouge in the mine. It may seem these two did the least. I'd argue in Shadow's case, it made Sonic realize it's best to avoid a fight to truly win. And Rouge? She dragged Shadow along? Yeah, that one's stretching it. There is a notable absence from this special: comic exclusive characters. There are no segments featuring Tangle and Whisper or Rough and Tumble. It's all game characters. Which is funny considering the plot revolved around a trinket originally owned by a comic exclusive villain. Let's get down to the individual segments. Naturally, Ian Flynn and artist Adam Bryce Thomas would bookend the adventure. What I will say is, the term 900th adventure is only brought up in those segments. We know the reason for it being the 900th adventure meta-wise, but in-universe? Well, I'm guessing it would include game events like Perfect Chaos and Dark Gaia, along with comic original adventures like the Battle of Angel Island and the Metal Virus. Which means that Sonic has had hundreds of off-screen adventures, either solo or with his friends, saving the world against threats like Dr. Eggman or some eldritch horror. But what would be considered an adventure worthy of being added to the total? I mean, it has to be world-saving levels since Zeddy Hunt apparently doesn't count, nor the incident with Surge and Kit. Then again, we don't know exactly when the 900th adventure takes place. Blaze's presence suggests it's after the 2022 annual since she's here on vacation, which itself takes place after at least Trial by Fire. The 900th adventure itself takes place before the Endless Summer special, as Sonic casually mentions saving the world 900 times. Although, wouldn't urban warfare have to have happened since then, due to Endless Summer taking place around the next arc, Misadventures? So technically, Sonic would have actually meant 901 world-saving adventures. But I'm thinking too hard about this. The point is, Sonic comic media in general has reached 900 adventures, and everyone's having fun with it. Speaking of, Evan's story is of course a bit off the wall with its visuals and game nods. And she's not the only writer that does this. Gigi's coloring really adds to the psychedelic nature of the story. One surprising contributor to the special is Nigel Kitching. For those who don't know, he's one of the main writers of Fleetway's Sonic the Comic. Remember, the Fleetway comics do count towards the total, so having a representative from that series helping out makes a lot of sense. And it's also appropriate he did the segment with Metal Sonic, since one of the villains in the Fleetway series are a group of Metal Sonics called the Brotherhood of the Metallics. Sonic being a bigger jerk in this segment is probably a nod to Fleetway Sonic himself, as based on what I've heard, he too tends to be more of a jerk in that series. Nigel's not the only representative from Fleetway to be involved in this special. Artist Richard Ellison worked on one of its many alternate covers. Brief tangent, Sega artist Yuji Yukawa, aka the one who redesigned the Sonic cast for the modern era, among other things, made his contribution with a cover of his own. Franchise representation is important after all. Now Daniel's story, from what I've heard, is a shout out to the Sonic OVA. I mean, why not? He already did one in Scrapnik Island. This time it's a nod to Sonic facing a giant Eggman robot in a big city, and not seeing Eggman himself during the confrontation. I do admit, this robot, the Egg Shogun Z, as Minho Kim coined it, is pretty cool looking. It helps that the art in general was anime inspired, and at the end of the story is still relatively intact. I'd like to see it return someday to have a proper fight with Sonic, unless it was parked at Eggperial City when the place was destroyed. The Blaze and Cream segment features the only new writer in this book, and it's artist Aaron Hammerstrom. He does a good job for his first outing, capturing Cream's politeness and outbursts perfectly, and Blaze's willingness to finish the job for the sake of his friends if Sonic can't. Plus, more game nods are always appreciated. The Abandoned Eggman Mine segment features the return of Caleb Goldner, who previously worked on the 2020 annual story, Reflections. This feels the most fanficky to me. It's pretty much what would happen if the Babylon Rogues try to fight Shadow the Hedgehog. Well, it ends as well as you expect. You know, I feel bad for the fans of the Babylon Rogues. At least in Endless Summer, they're treated with a lot more dignity than here. Then again, the Rogues wanted a highly unstable gem to sell to the highest bidder, so some people would say they got what they deserved. Well, it won't matter now as the Warp Topaz is finally dealt with. And even if it survived its final overload, the cave it came from collapsed so no one can get to it ever again. That's pretty much all I have to say in general. The fact that Sonic's comic-related adventures lasted this long is amazing. IDW did not have to do something like this. They could have made a proper annual and call it a day. Instead, they experimented with this special event, having all of these different writers and artists come together to work on a bigger piece of an overall tale. I'd say it's a microcosm of Sonic comics throughout the years, having different contributors add their piece to the franchise. While there have been misses, when it hits, it hits. And I'd say, in my opinion, the 900th adventure is pretty good. Perhaps it could have been better if there were more nods to the other comic series and utilized the IDW cast in some capacity. Chances are the staff were probably limited to what's available, and if that's the case, I'm still impressed that they made, pretty much, a coherent story. Thank you for joining me for this lengthy review, and have a good day. I wonder how the story selection process went. Were the writers and artists assigned to work a certain segment? Or were they given an outline of the basic story, certain parameters they have to follow, and then were told to basically cut loose? I'm thinking option 2.